Welcome to Season 5 of the Lead with Coffee podcast, where we continue the journey into how you can change the culture in your business and your home through simple leadership practices. Grab a cup of coffee and get ready to join into today's conversation. Welcome back to the Lead with Coffee podcast. Today we want to dive into a fun topic that actually one of our inspirational leaders, Craig Groeschel, brought up, and that is the contradictory quality of exceptional leaders. We all know those leaders that can have all these different facets to their personalities, and you're thinking like, how are they leading well when they act like this? And sometimes it's part of opposites attract. Well, sometimes that has to do with the characteristics of your leadership as well. So one of the things that Craig talked about in his podcast is the contradictory quality of leaders. So we thought we'd break down some of those key elements that he brought up that really resonated with us.
Yeah.
And to dive into how leaders can seem both enigmatic and unpredictable, but they're operating on key talents and key areas that make them successful. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this was really interesting to me because I'd never really thought about it before, and that's one of the reasons we really appreciate Craig Groeschel is because he brings things to the table that are so obvious but you don't really think about to put together.
Yeah.
And so going through these couple of podcasts that we're going to do to unpack kind of what he said is really interesting because, you know, and I think everyone will see through the conversation of what we're talking about, but it was just... Again, it's one of those things that you don't necessarily think about. You realize it, but you don't think about why.
Yeah.
And he kind of just broke it down and made it easy to understand. So,
yeah.
And just so relatable. So that's what we're going to go over.
Yeah. So we have 6 different qualities that we'll go through. We'll do it on a 2-part podcast since there was quite a bit of content. And I think we'll have some good conversations about each one and people that we've experienced that maybe have one or the other or both and what that is like. So today, one of the first ones is that leaders are optimistic and realistic, which you wouldn't think that those are 2 characteristics that would be in the same leader. But the optimism allows you to overcome fear by seeing opportunities that others don't. And you know, David, when you run into an optimistic leader versus a real fearful leader, you feel it.
Yeah, you do. And, you know, I would say that I will self-identify as an optimistic leader. I usually, you know, try to see what the good is in a project or a situation or whatever the case may be. That, like, I've been through a lot already. We'll figure out how to get through this one too. And then, yeah, I think that in the dynamic with a realistic leader, it's like it's only facts, you know. And if the facts aren't lining up, then maybe it's not going to work. So to have someone that has both of those characteristics is really interesting.
Yeah. So an optimistic leader sees problems as opportunities in disguise. And that's something that Craig points out, which I think is so relative to leadership in business. We know that when there is a problem, there is an opportunity that to either improve a process, improve a system, or change your direction and to something that might even be so much better than you even started with, right? But it's hard to sometimes see past the problem. But that's where the optimism has to come in.
Yeah, and part of the optimism might be, okay, this process does not work.
Right.
So let's figure out how to completely, you know, throw it away and start over and be optimistic. Like, we put a lot of work into this, but we're seeing it's not going to work. Let's start over and be optimistic that we can do it better next time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that it's interesting because when I think about the dynamic of us as a couple, you are definitely more of the optimistic and I am more of the realistic. So maybe it is that your leaders, it's a partnering of leaders also that can take a company and move it forward, because I think you have to have both. Mm-hmm. Everyone doesn't have all of these characteristics that we're going to talk about. Typically, you're running in your key talent, so you may have one of the 6 that we're going to go through. So don't put yourself in the box of, as you're listening to this 2-part series of like, well, I'm not optimistic and realistic, or I'm not empowering and controlling, you know, and one or the other. Right. We are always a blend of all of these things. We have a dominant trait that will come forward.
Yeah.
Your dominant trait is is optimism. My dominant trait is realism. and I think that's also part of our roles.
Yeah.
You know, you're the president, you're the visionary, you're the dreamer, you're seeing where you want it to go. And I'm the realist, more in the CFO role, going like, this is the reality of where we are.
How are we going to get there?
It's great that you want to go there, but you know, your funding has to follow you, or how do we move that dream into something that's tangible financially so we can get there, right? And I think that
we go together like peanut butter and jelly.
Lord help us. We're only a couple minutes in. This is a good one. But this is so true. I feel like this is where we are in our business right now, where we have real critical decisions that we have to make. And I'm very much in the weeds of the business, and you're in the vision of where you want it to go, how we can shift and how we can pivot out of this season that's challenging.
Yeah.
And so I think that something that Craig says, he says it quite often, is there's, with every problem, there's two wins, a solution to find or a lesson to learn. Mm-hmm. And I think this makes you stand out as a leader when you realize that every obstacle gives you an opportunity to improve your solution, solve a problem, or learn a lesson. And man, we've all learned a lot of lessons over the last few years about dreaming big, moving your company forward, moving your organization to the next level, and then the reality of life that kind of like rips you back down, to be grounded. But I think you can't solve a problem you don't acknowledge. And I think that's the realist in me, where it's like, I would love to just dream all day and be a visionary with you all day. But we have to acknowledge where we are so we can get to those places. But we have to have a foundation that is realistic.
So you're saying I dream all day long?
All day long. Just sits in here and thinks about...
Ponders.
Life's next problem.
Seriously.
Don't you agree?
No, I agree. And, you know, part of that, being at this business for, you know, going on 23 years now, we've had ups and downs, and, you know, the valleys and the mountaintops. And I just had this conversation yesterday with my coach, Dustin, that, you know, we certainly learn more in the valleys. And that's where the lessons learned, and being optimistic that, you know, we're in a valley in a situation, but we're going to learn from it. We're going to come out of it even stronger and be prepared. And so I have optimism. Do I have optimism every day? No, not even close.
Right.
But my overall behavior is to be optimistic. Like, we've been through some hard stuff before in the last, 2 decades. We will certainly get through the next one and get through this one. And so I'm optimistic, like, we're scrappy. Mm-hmm. We're scrappy, and we can figure this out. And, I am still realistic of what we can and can't accomplish. And in some parts of the business, I would say I'm maybe overly realistic on what I think we can and can't handle sometimes, and need to be more optimistic on what we think we can take on. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of funny. It goes back and forth, and I know you are the same way, as you're optimistic about a lot of things and a dreamer about a lot of things, but you are also very realistic. So I think we both have a dominant trait. Yeah. We can go back and forth, and we can probably go deep into the other one if we have to. Yeah. But again, I think it's a good blend. It's a good blend that everyone should think about, of trying to have within themselves, but also have a partner that you can do it with, whether it is your spouse or business partner, whatever the case. And for us, that's one and the same. I think we should retitle this The Contradictory Quality of Exceptional Partnerships. Nice. Because really that's what this is. It's not just leadership, it's a partnership, whether it's, like you said, your marriage, your work, or friendship, whatever it is. I think we're going to gravitate to people that have a different key talent than we do. Yeah. Because we need that. Right. We don't want to be with a realist does not want to be with a bunch of realists, because then all of you are like so anxiety driven that you don't know how to even take one step forward, right? You need the optimist to be like, come on, it's going to be all right. Yeah. Like the world is not going to end today. But sometimes, when that's your dominant trait, you're just like,
the burden of the world can really start to weigh you down because you can't see past it. So understanding both of these characteristics and figuring out how to blend them into your leadership, like you said, and knowing that you're going to have a dominant side, but maybe the side that's a little bit weaker is something you have to work on.
Right. And those valleys are the perfect time to work on the weakness part.
Yeah.
And realizing it. And one of the other things Dustin had said is like, if you look back over the past year, what have I done personally as a leader to allow the business to go into a valley? Mm-hmm. And being realistic of going back and like, oh yeah, I can see a couple of things where I was like, it'll be all right. And not really digging into it. That's a huge growing and learning experience for me to take the business forward. And optimistically, I feel really good of where the business is going. I see great opportunities out in front of us. But being realistic right now, it's a tough third quarter, and I think we can talk about that. COVID has affected a lot of different things, and the first couple of years, everyone was kind of sailing through, but now things are starting to tighten up, and opportunities that were there weren't, and we are optimistically shifting and pivoting to other things. And like I said, I think that our business in particular, we have big things ahead of us and big opportunities that we have to go after.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, though, because if you're a business owner or maybe you're a leader in an organization, you have to understand that the vision you had going into even this year has been impacted by inflation and the emergence of a recession and all these things that are impacting your business. And if you're in a professional consulting business like we are, everyone's tightening those purse strings because they're feeling the impact of all the inflation and all these extra costs. And so this is where being optimistic can be hard because reality is just starting to feel heavy. And so I think that something I said to a colleague the other day as we were just, kind of working through a hard season, I said, I'm always reminded that God didn't bring us this far to only bring us this far.
Amen.
And he didn't bring this company 35 years to give you 35 years of history and wisdom that said we figured it out all those other times that we were, in the valley, for it to just close the doors down and say, okay, we're done with you. Go find something else, right? Like, we're in it for a reason. There's a lesson for it. It's hard. All we want to do is crawl to the top and get out of it.
Yeah.
But we know that this is hardening us for what's going to come in the future. And you have to be prepared as leaders. And so I think this is part of the exceptional leaders can be both optimistic and realistic. And it's such a good conversation. If you just stopped right there and had this conversation at your next staff meeting of, do you see yourself as more of an optimist or a realist? Ask your leadership team. And what's your dominant one? And then have a good discussion like we are right now about why they feel that's their dominant one. And then how do you become stronger on the other side? So the next one would be that you can be both empowering and controlling. Mm-hmm. So this one actually, I think, is a majority of high-level leaders. Yeah. High-level leaders, if you're successful, you know when to empower people, and you know what areas of your business you can empower people to go run and lead, and you know areas that you have to control or your business will just go sideways.
Right. And again, this was one that just was enlightening to me. Like, yeah, I agree with that. There are certain things that I want to empower people on and just say, number one, it could be in your drudgery zone where you don't really want to do it. So you want to empower, like, please go do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to have anything to do with it. That work is drudgery to me. Just make it happen. But on the other hand, as a high level leader, you have to be in control of all situations of your business. And even though that might be drudgery work for you, you do need to be, in a sense, controlling overall to make sure that what they are doing is in line with the direction of the business. This podcast is sponsored by CBSI. For the last 35 years, CBSI has helped customers navigate change in their organizations, whether they need a team to manage their construction projects or are planning a relocation to right-size their office space. With transparent communication and culture-building strategies, CBSI leads the leaders of organizations through complex projects. If you are in the need of a proven team, check them out at cbsisandiego.com.
And you've mentioned it before, and Craig mentions it as well, that when you control too much, you're the lid to your organization.
Amen to that.
And you talked about that on a previous podcast of realizing there were areas where you really felt like I was the lid to the organization for these aspects. And I was controlling elements of this rather than stepping back and saying, is someone else better to be empowered to move this part forward because it's really in their wheelhouse to move it forward, where I'm doing what I've always done because this is how we built it.
Right.
But someone else might see it in a different way. And if they were empowered to move it forward, where would we be, right?
Yeah. And so several things just went through my mind as you were saying that. But it's even, there are things in your business that you are responsible for and you hate to do, but you have to find the right team players that actually love that work.
Right.
And so that's in your hiring, that's in, just having conversations with your current staff to see, is the position that they're in the right position?
Mm-hmm.
Are there other parts of the business that they could be responsible for or, work on? And are there parts of the business that they are wasting their time on?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's in their drudgery zone and they're wasting their time, is that the right thing for the business? So finding the right seat on the bus, as Jim Collins would say, is going to help your business when it comes to getting better and figuring out the areas that you need to continue to control and the things that you can empower people to do, and just let them go and just watch it flourish.
Yeah, and being controlling has a negative connotation, but in leadership, control is not always a bad thing. Control is also leadership. It is also strategic planning and all these things. And so there's this balance for exceptional leaders of knowing how to empower and when to control. And it's almost a dance. I feel like it's a dance you play all the time of assessing the situation, letting go, pulling it back, letting go, pulling it back. And you know that the areas you pull back are really wired for you to pull back as the top leadership of the organization. You're not just going to empower everyone to do whatever they want. No. You're going to empower them based on your vision, your strategic plan, based on the goals of the organization to go, implement what you're dreaming and envisioning. But at the same time, you're not asking them to be the visionary, right?
Right. And you're not going to empower the intern the same as you're going to empower the vice president,
right, or
the senior project manager, or whoever that is in your organization. And you have to be real careful on that, because people have different levels of bandwidth.
Yeah.
Number one, people have different levels of experience, and it depends on what part of the business you are empowering them to do. And granted, and I've heard, I don't know how many stories I've heard where there were a group, the leadership of the business was having a hard time keeping up with the competition. And so they did a test, and this one was Patrick Lencioni's test, and of course I can't even think of the name of it right now. But they realized that the attorney, out of all the leaders in the room, the executive leaders, the attorney was the visionary guy. And so going through this test, they realized that they need to allow him to do vision work. And they started letting him do vision work, and the business started crushing it because they were really good at making a product, but they weren't really good at envisioning how to make that product better. So just very interesting of who you empower. And I'm going to think of that name before this podcast is over because I feel really dumb not knowing what that test is. But I think it's.
We'll put it in the show notes.
We will put it in the show notes for sure.
That?
His book actually comes out next week on this assessment.
Yeah, that's good. Craig also talks about that most leaders focus on finding the right strategy, but the best leaders focus on empowering the right leaders. And that's what you're talking about is what are people's key talents in the room, and it's not by title.
Right.
And I think sometimes we as leaders really get stuck on title,
right,
that only the people at the top can do these things. But the reality is someone might be in a role that you're not even thinking about, and they have the foresight to see where the company could go. So don't don't spend all your time focusing on what you think people's talents are because of position. Work with them and start to ask questions. It's part of the strength that I acquired in working with the college district was really just having deep dialogue with my staff of what's your passion, where do you want to go, how do you see yourself getting there, and if it's not in this role, what role do you really feel that you're seeking out? And that changed the dynamic of our organization because we started to be able to see we had people placed in areas that were not their key talents, but we had the ability to shift. And once we shift and got alignment, we propelled from a $5 million business to a $30 million business. And we did it pretty seamlessly because we had the right people in the right spots.
Yeah. So I will go back. The Working Genius Assessment from Patrick Lencioni. He's got his book coming out next week. It's an online test. It's like $25. It takes you like 10, 15 minutes to do. But it's really good, and it does just that. It lets everyone on the team figure out what their genius is and what their, drudgery zone or whatever it is, that the things that they're better at, the things that they are good at doing, and the things that they're not so good at doing, to be able to figure that out. And it from what you said, it's the same kind of thing. It's a bunch of questions that are being asked you of who you are. You said the same thing. It's asking people a bunch of questions of who they are. And that's really where you find this out, whether you use a test or you just
start a dialogue
and start asking questions of what people's passions are.
Right.
And you can figure it out on your own. Mm-hmm. It's great that there are tools there that can map it out for you, but just again having conversations with people, you can tell if there are people in the organization that aren't happy where they're at.
Yeah.
And figuring out what's going to motivate them to put them in a better place. And I guarantee there are people in your organization that would kill it if they were put in the right position, but maybe today they can't wait till Friday comes and they hate when Monday comes.
Yeah.
Just because they're in the wrong position.
Yeah. I think it's funny because we're talking about characteristics of leaders. And when I think about this test from Patrick Lencioni, half the room at Entree Leadership was like, I know my thing. I know what I am. And it's
Talk about self-identification.
Right. And I think you are a systematic leader that likes these types of tests and surveys and all these things, or you're a relationship leader. And that's my plug on leadership. I am a relationship leader. I do not enjoy these types of tests. I don't like being put into a box and a bubble, and that's how I'm defined. And I'm a 3 on this scale, and I'm a this on that scale. I feel like I'm evolving in my leadership, but I would rather spend time building relationships with people, talking to them, getting them to think about their passion more than go take this survey, go take this test, get yourself into your box of what's your drudgery zone and where you're a high peak performer, and then now we can work together. It's like this is totally the contradictory quality of exceptional leaders, because we both are strong leaders. And David loves a system and a process and a survey, and I am I'm clawing at the walls. I'm not taking it. I'm not being in your box. I'm gonna go build a relationship with someone, ask them what they want, and help them get there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I prefer the test. I think. We've never said to all of our staff, we are going to take this test, and then
I won't
we're going
to
do it. Well, number she won't, but it's not somewhere I think we'll go. But for me personally, taking the test, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it helps you identify if you've been doing something for years and you just don't like it. This is something that will help you identify of why your thinking patterns, why you don't like it.
Yeah,
and that's the part I like about it.
Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about is that leaders can be both urgent and patient. So the secret to getting things done is action, right? You have to have an urgency.
Make a freaking decision.
Apparently,
as Dave Ramsey would say.
This one piqued his interest.
Yes. I've been with enough non-decision makers to feel very strong about this.
Yeah. But as a strong leader from your 30 plus years of being in leadership, that you have to create urgency.
Yeah.
But you can't be in urgency all the time.
Absolutely.
That's how you burn people out.
Right.
Right? So there's this sense of urgency. You have to create it in your organization. You have to create momentum. You have to create urgency with clients sometimes to get things moving forward. And then you do have to also have patience in times like we are in now, where you're in these valleys. You know, you're not always at the peaks, you're in the valley, and the valley takes patience.
It does.
While you put ideas and concepts and proposals out there, you can't just keep hounding people until they give you what you want. There's this sense of I have to wait. There's a season of waiting, and there's a season of moving forward. And your organization has peaks and valleys and seasons where you know you have to just pause.
Right.
And those, I think, are the hardest for a leader that has a key characteristic of urgency.
Yes, and so I will, break down why I feel this way, and usually it's because we're project managers, it's project-related things where whether it be a design issue or a funding issue or an RFI or something where the owner, the architect, whoever it might be, just is not responding in time. You have a lot of money that's already building up, you're already paying out, and for someone to be in a key role but not be able to make hard key decisions in that role, that's what drives me crazy, because you're wasting a lot of time and resources not being able to come up with a decision, or you're in a weekly meeting on a construction project or something in your business where no decisions are being made. You are basically having a conversation about why you can't make the decision or excuses why a decision hasn't been made, and then you're scheduling the next meeting and nothing is moving forward. That's what I have a hard time with. And that's really a characteristic on leaders of not having the maybe experience or the training or whatever it is that they do. They are there to make decisions. They are there to move things forward, and whether they don't have the self-confidence or whatever the case may be, that one's a tough one for me.
Yeah, or they haven't been empowered to make the decision because they have a title, but they don't have authority. We talk about that a lot.
That absolutely could be true. Come join us. We're going to talk about this project, and we're going to launch this thing, and da-da-da-da-da. And we started asking at the beginning of some interviews on some big projects do we have those in the room that can make the decision on this project to move forward or not? And they're like, well, no, not really.
No.
It's like, okay, then why are you saying that this project is going to go forward when it probably isn't, because the key decision makers aren't even in the room?
Right. So patience is not the absence of action.
Right.
I'm going to say that one again because I got a little stumbled on it. Patience is not the absence of action. Patience is about timing. You're going to take action, but you're creating an urgency, and then you have to have the little patience, and then it's about timing of when you're going to follow back up. Right? And I think that's part of business. So the key to balancing this bias to act quickly is the wisdom to know when to wait.
Yes. So you call somebody because you need an answer for something, and they don't call you back in an hour. You don't necessarily call them again.
We don't know anybody like that.
And then 30 minutes after that, you call them again until they either, block your call or finally give in.
Do you guys have these people in your lives that do this to you? We have people we work with that they do this to us.
Yeah, and I
not in our organization, clients.
Yeah.
It's David. I'm not going to lie.
It's definitely not me. It is definitely not me. I am not the one that's always on my phone like, I got to talk to this person.
Even our kids can be like that, though, right?
Yeah.
You did not respond.
Right. You did not respond right away. But that's where you have to have the patience. Maybe it's a phone call with a follow-up email. The person got it. And for the most part, not everybody, but for the most part, you can get a text response from most people saying, hey, you know what? I'm in a meeting. I'm in an all day. I'm traveling today. I will get back to you. And that's that. I love that. That's easy. But the constant phone call, that it's not good. There's no patience there.
We diverted. This isn't about telephone calls, but we're on it.
No, but
we hit a nerve.
But that's kind of the thing. If you're waiting for something, maybe it's not a phone call. It's continual contact until you get an answer. And for some people that works really well, but being on the other end of that doesn't work well for me.
Yeah, it's hard in business because you're wanting something, you're seeking something, you're trying to perform or sell your best product, and you're tied to do it. Your business is dependent on you doing this. So there's this urgency because you're trying to, make sure that you can keep all your staff busy and keep your company moving forward. So you can't just be patient all the time and just wait for the work to come to you.
No,
you got to go out and create an urgency.
Absolutely.
So that's the exceptional qualities of knowing how to be urgent and patient at the same time. So to review what we went over for this part one, on key characteristics of exceptional leaders is you're optimistic and realistic. You're empowering and controlling. You know when to do both. And you can be urgent and patient. Again, you might not be all of these things. You may have one of these kind of contradictory elements that really fit you, but you're going to fall into one of these. And so on the next part two, we'll go over 3 more to really roll out all these different concepts to you, and then start to think about it with your team over the next week. Maybe use one of those. Just start with optimist and realist, and you're going to see who's at your leadership table, and it's going to start to make sense. And you can probably self-define everyone yourself, but what if you let people tell you what they feel they are and why, and explain why they are the way they are, like we just did, and it helps you build relationship and trust.
Yeah, so stay tuned to part 2, and as we dig into this next dynamic and for some more fun conversation. We appreciate that you decided to hang out and spend some time with us discussing life and leadership. It would mean the world to us if you would share this episode on social media to increase our online presence. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a minute to rate it and review it wherever you listen. Mahalo!